And for every one of these entrepreneurs, anyone listening, when you believe in your product and it always starts there, then what you're doing does make a difference. So how can you not be excited about it?
They've answered your question, so they trust you. They know what the problem is because they're repeating the problem in their head. And then when you get asked, would you like to look at certain alternatives? Suddenly you're thinking, yeah, and you're not thinking about the budget. And you can only feel that emotion if you are a prospect. So why don't you try this with your team or your friend or your budding entrepreneur and be the prospect?
If we do that, if we listen harder and ask more questions about the problems we're being given, you'll see big changes in the way you sell.
Hey guys, welcome to Ashish Janiani. It's my pleasure to be your host, and today's interview is fun. It's filled with knowledge, and this guy is a superpower of energy that you're going to witness today. If you've been struggling in sales, if you've been struggling with some motivation, you need that vibration, you need that positive energy to go out there and get it done, then this interview today with this man is the right interview. And when you witness this, please take away the energy, the passion that this man has, combine that with the skills that he has, and then you utilize it and you will have the success that this guy has. So who am I speaking about today? Okay. He's a sought after speaker and 5 times best-selling author. Okay. He's not only successfully sold for New York Life Insurance Company and Xerox Corporation, but he started his own training institute, which is what he runs today. Okay. His programs have allowed him to amass a client list that reads like a who's who of Fortune 500 companies, including Toyota, Disney, NASA, over 50 financial institutions. His books, How to Change Minds, Why People Don't Believe You, Customer-Centered Selling, How to Run Seminars and Workshops, The Way of the Road Warrior, and Mental Agility have been featured in USA Today, Harvard Business Review, Publishers Weekly, and have spent over 100 weeks on the National Business Bestseller list and translated into over a dozen languages. He currently lives in Chevy Chase, Maryland. Please help me welcome Robert Jolles. Hey, Robert, how you doing?
I'm feeling good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good.
Sir.
So, Robert, it's a pleasure to have you. Knowing the energy that you have, the first time that you and I interacted, right? I felt that positive vibe. It's very less often that you remember something and someone after a month. And I did remember you. And it's a privilege to have you. I'm sure it's going to be exciting for the audience that's watching this. I want them to take notes, of course, but also take away the energy, because as a sales professional, energy is something that a lot of professionals lack, and you figured that out. So why don't we start with, how did you get into sales? What made you dive deep into it?
Okay. And I do want to start with the energy piece, which is, if anybody's watching, you'll notice I'm not sitting down. And I really suggest, as we're sort of trapped in this virtual world right now, and even when we come out, this virtual world will remain. Get yourself a sit-stand option and get up when you're going to talk to a client. Get up when the conversation's important. So I'm modeling what I do, okay? And I am up and ready for you. How did I get into this? Well, I was a successful insurance salesman, of all things, when I was 21 and 22. But I was what we call an unconscious competent, meaning I was somewhat natural, which is really nice to be patted on the back and say, kid, you're a natural. But when you're in sales, I don't care how natural you are, how wonderful you are. It's a career of peaks and valleys. So what exactly do you fix when you don't know what it is you're doing right? Being a natural to me wasn't enough. So I had a successful career at New York Life, but I did go knocking and said, I really want to study the training side of this. I have a script I walk out with, and that's about it. And my wits about me. So shifting over and becoming a corporate trainer for New York Life gave me a little bit more structure. Going to work for Xerox, that was the real turning point for me. Working for a company that processed everything. At Xerox, you didn't tie your shoe without a process. But when you have a process, you have a way of measuring what you're doing. And when you can measure it, you can fix it. That really taught me not just about selling and training. It taught me to love selling and training. And, I took off from there.
Wow. All right. You mentioned a couple very important points for me. A, you mentioned process, and B, you mentioned, being focused in that process. That's what you were trying to say, right? It's not just good enough to have talent. Now, because most of the audience that is going to watch you are entrepreneurs, right? Most entrepreneurs are going to sell to a B2B client some kind of a product, primarily technology these days, but it can be an offline product as well. They have a small team. A lot of the sales is done by the entrepreneur, and their life kind of relies on that sale because they don't have a big pipeline which you can touch upon. Right now, can you highlight, in this scenario, an entrepreneur not with a big team doing B2B sales, what kind of process should he or she follow given the times that we are in, which has changed a lot of the things that we probably do for the coming years?
Okay. Well, first of all, to my brothers and sisters who are entrepreneurs, I actually left Xerox 27 years ago to be an entrepreneur, to make my way, to take a shot at this thing. And I applaud every single one of you. And I think most people will tell you when they are entrepreneurs, the only regret they have is that they didn't do it sooner. So welcome aboard. Now, let me answer your question. I think some of the biggest issues that I see in terms of selling B2B and really trying to adapt a sales process is we first of all we disregard some of the basics of selling. We disregard asking questions and listening. Now I know there isn't a person who's listening to this who didn't go and yawn and go, not that one again. But I've spent over 30 years taping, listening, watching case studies, role plays of very grizzled and seasoned salespeople who've learned this lesson a lot of times and have lost it just as fast. You see, I mentioned about being an unconscious competent. Sometimes we can be an unconscious incompetent. We don't know that we're not doing that. So please, let's not disregard the old lessons of asking questions and listening attentively, even to questions you know the answer. Let the client paint the picture. And the other critical piece of the process for me is when a client gives you, for the lack of a better word, the blessing of trusting you enough by telling you something they don't tell every vendor, they don't tell every salesperson, which are challenges and concerns that they're having. In my 30 years, if I could corner a salesperson and say, all right, I'll give you 30 seconds of me, I would hone in on the fact that when a client tells you that they have an issue, please, please, please don't fix it for them. Don't solve it for them. Don't offer a solution for them. Go deeper. Ask more questions about the problem. Ask them why. Ask them how often. Ask them how much. Take them deeper into that issue. And the more in touch they are with that issue, the deeper they feel that problem, the more urgency they're going to feel to fix it. And that's where leverage comes in selling. It doesn't come from us being able to recommend things in an energetic, creative way. It comes from us acting like consultants and true friends of the client. And a friend to a friend, forget B2B. If a friend told you they were having an issue, you wouldn't run off and solve it for them. You'd want to hear more. If we do that, if we listen harder and ask more questions about the problems we're being given, you'll see big changes in the way you sell.
All right. Very important. So I'm going to break it down to three parts. The first is uh, just looking at people, including myself, and I'm sure you must have noticed at some level as well. It's easier to ask questions when you're in person or over a virtual meeting when you know you have time. But when you're making cold calls, and you know you've only got a minute or two, is there a strategy or a set of questions that we can ask? That's the first bit.
Absolutely.
And then I would come to your books and a little bit more into the question part.
Good, but let's solve this first piece because you're right.
Yes.
If you're not going to talk to me, all these great questions I've got lined up aren't going to help. So why wouldn't you talk to me? I do think we don't pay enough attention to our opening tactic. And to me, the process guy, there's a process for an opening. We all know the first piece, which is I'm going to tell you who I am and where I'm from. Got it. But I think we dropped the ball on the second piece. And the second piece is what we call, it's a WIFM. And I didn't just sneeze. It's an acronym. It's a WIFM. It stands for what's in it for me. Sometimes in sales training, you'll hear it called a rationale statement. Sometimes you'll hear it called an initial benefit statement. But why in the world, if we don't know each other, would I answer your questions if I don't know what's in it for me to answer these questions? So when we tell somebody today, I'd like to ask questions, take some notes, listen, and this will help you and me, or this will allow me to educate myself, maybe speed up the process, ask you questions you've never been asked before, find issues that perhaps you don't see as significant right now. That's what a consultant does. If I provide that with them, if I actually appeal to their sense of greed, and don't let that word scare you. Obviously, I'm not a fan of greedy people, but in business, every entrepreneur who's listening, if your desire is not to be successful, to help others to be successful, then you won't be successful. So we all have a sense of greed in us. Why wouldn't I answer that in the first 45 seconds, not wait to be asked, but tell them what's in it for them to have the conversation? And the last part about the opening is what I want to do in this call, which means today what I want to do is ask questions, listen, take notes. Let's put that out there in 45 seconds. And if we do, it isn't a perfect science. We certainly open the door for exactly where we're going. The one who's asking the questions is the one who's controlling the conversation, and that's going to be us.
Amazing. Can you give one example? Any B2B call example that people can think about? I would love if that example was for a marketing service, because we all are marketing something, especially digital marketing, PR, because a lot of these entrepreneurs today have these products. But any example that you can pick.
In an opening tactic.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So how are you today? My name is Rob Jolles. I'm from Rob's Marketing Services, and we've been helping some of the companies in your area not only improve their ability to connect with clients, but connect with those clients on a deeper level. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to offer those types of services to you, but I'll tell you this. If you give me 15 minutes to let me sit down, just listen to you, take some notes. I'm going to ask a lot of questions and learn a little bit more about what you're doing. If there's a need for the services that I offer, I'll go ahead and make that recommendation. If not, I'll be on my way. Now, I want to pause. What you heard was a greeting, a rationale or initial benefit statement with them. You actually heard a sense of process. This is what we're going to do today. And you even heard the fourth part, which I think is important, is time. I don't say just want a couple of minutes. I just want to just be a minute or two. We've all heard that. And that triggers something in a lot of us that says, oh no, I won't be able to get off this call. So we put a time out there. We put a with them out there. We let them know who we are, and we let them know what we're going to do. One last thing, that opening I just laid out can fit for a warm call. It could fit for the third call. What will change is today I won't be asking you questions. Today I'm going to go over some of the ideas that we have. So we can fit this into almost any opening, follow-up, cold, warm, you name it. And it doesn't have to be in any order, but if you do those four things, we increase our chances. I hope that did it for you.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it did. It did. And you just emphasize the importance of a pitch, right? And people don't spend 20 minutes making a pitch because somehow I don't know, it doesn't make sense for them, but it makes so much sense to have a pitch. Fantastic. Okay, let me come to this now. If somebody is now meeting a client online or offline, are there any processes you can talk about that? In fact, talk about a book, because you've written so many books. Any book that is relevant to our conversation right now, which you've seen people show a lot of interest in.
Okay. I'll, if you don't mind, I'll give you two, because, I wrote a very big, successful book in the U.S. called Customer Centered Selling. I'm very proud of it. It sold a lot of copies. But I wrote a set, and that for years, Simon & Schuster, the publisher, wanted me to write another one. And I kept saying, I don't know what to tell you. I haven't changed my mind. But then I realized, what was missing to me? I laid out, here's the way we're going to sell. But see, for a real salesperson who's listening right now, it'll connect. But what about the HR person? What about the manager who's listening? What about all the other people who say, well, I don't really sell, but I'm work with a lot of people? Well, they do sell. We both know that. And so I wrote a book called How to Change Minds, The Art of Influence Without Manipulation. And I wrote it for that audience. I wrote it for the audience that says, I'd like to learn the tactics of a salesperson, but I don't necessarily actively sell every day. I would like to learn how to persuade and influence. And to me, that opened a completely different door, which was not just a beat on the drum that says, here's how we sell, but to beat on a different drum that says, here's why we sell. And here's why sometimes when we ask tougher questions, questions that don't make people feel very good, we're not being mean, we're being merciful. And to go over that conversation and have people not fear the process that we put in place to them, to me, that's a really important touch. I've grown up a little bit to say, hey, here's a great sales process, but I'm not assuming everybody wants that until we hear why it's one of the kindest things you could do for another human being, which is to actively listen and learn and take them deeper into a problem that they've been too afraid to look at themselves. To me, that's the beauty of selling.
Wow. Can you please elaborate on influence without manipulation? Uh, I mean, people should know more about this.
Yeah. Well, in the book, I go over about 26 different little checkpoints, but I love the question because I'm going to answer your question in one word. Okay. The
Okay.
difference between influence and manipulation comes down to this word: intent. Intent, meaning if what I have for you today is really going to help me, the entrepreneur, because I need this sale right now, then whatever follows will be manipulation. I'm not doing this for the client. I'm doing it for me. And before we scratch our head and go, why would I ever do that? Believe me, I've been involved in contests where I was very close to making a nice big leap in terms of winning a club trip or winning a bonus. And I didn't have much time left. And there comes this client that may or may not need my product. So let's not turn our nose up and say that would never be me. In fact, we have to be aware that it could be us. But when the intent is for that client, in other words, I'm trying to help a client to break past their fear of change. The way they're doing it isn't very good, but you know what? They've been doing it that way a long time. What I got might be better. Oh boy, what if it's worse? So my client is paralyzed by that fear of change, which means I can't just ask, how you doing? Why you doing? Where you doing? Sometimes I have to ask, what challenges does that create? What impact does that have over here? What are the repercussions here? And that doesn't make a client feel good. But if my intent is to save that customer from not a small loss, but potentially losing their business or losing a key client or employee, then I will use these tactics and not fear using them. And that's that line. Where's the intent? It should always be on the customer. If it is, we can ask tougher questions and never be ashamed.
Okay, wow. Wow, man. I'm just absorbing what you just said. Okay. Now, what happens with entrepreneurs also is they face a lot of rejections when they are practicing something like this. Uh, can you talk about the importance of good rejection when they are practicing what you're sharing right now? Because it will come, it will happen. And what kind of a process they can further build upon basis your book customer centric selling.
Okay, did you say good rejection?
Yes.
It's an interesting combination of words, isn't it?
Because if I'm
But
improving, right, if I'm improving in my pitch, from what I learned from Robert, I'll get a rejection maybe because I'm still not there yet, but I'm a little better than last time. So I would say it's a good rejection.
oh, don't get me wrong. It's an interesting use of words, but it's a fabulous use of words. Because one time on a red eye of all things, a trip across the country about 3 a.m, I popped up in my seat and I came up with this definition of what wisdom is. And to me, wisdom consists of three things. It consists of success, failure, and a conscious knowledge of the lessons learned from each. So if all we've been is successful, never been rejected, we're very lucky. I wouldn't mind shaking your hand, but I don't know that if we're any wiser for it. If all we've had is rejection or failure, again, unfortunate, and I feel for you. But life consists of a balance of both. And the important part is not to just succeed or fail, but figure out why that was successful or why that failed. And each time we do, we get wiser. That's why we tend, as we get older, to get a little wiser because we've just had more experiences. But a good rejection, as you just put it, is I would define it as not just getting rejected. I'll call that a rejection. A good one in my book would be why? Study it, figure it out, Don't be a victim. Don't blame it on the client. Even if the client is rejecting you because of something that you had specifically told them and they said they didn't hear it or it didn't register. Don't blame the client. Say it louder. Say it better. Say it visually. Make it, fix it. But don't be a victim. If it's a rejection, we have an opportunity to learn and grow and evolve and get better. And if we can do that, it's been not just a good rejection, a fabulous rejection.
Wow. After 30 years of being in this, how do you get so much passion still?
I love what I do. I love what I do. I love what I do. I truly do. And what's more, I've a little quote on my desk. It says, we weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference. As a sales trainer, as somebody who helps people sell, I feel like I make a difference. But as a salesperson, and for every one of these entrepreneurs, anyone listening, when you believe in your product, and it always starts there, then what you're doing does make a difference. So how can you not be excited about it? Just have to take that excitement, not just the words, but the tune, right? We got to put those two together, believe in our product, and let's get our pitch, pace, and pausing our words to sound like we believe in it. But it starts here. We've got to believe in what we're doing.
Wow. If you're listening to this, go back the last 30 seconds and play it 3 times. He said a lot of great things, but what he just said is the most beautiful thing, Robert. Like, it's so true, and it just means a lot. Please go listen that 30-second back if you're listening to this. All right, I'm going to ask you last 2 questions. I still want to know a little bit more about the process of, when I'm sitting with a client or I'm in a virtual meeting. So I've now got an appointment. Now, how do I go about the meeting? I've got this customer, I'm going to ask them questions, but is there a process that I can follow?
Remember, I don't tie my shoe without one, so you bet there is. All right, so we got a nice opening tactic in. Now we got a cup of coffee in front of us or whatever. All right, time to go to work. Here's the thing. We've got to build trust, right? It always starts with trust. An opening tactic is nice. It opened the door. We just walked in, but there's no trust yet. And trust might be one of the most difficult things to actually process. But to me, if we keep our questions open, remember, questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. In other words, we can't go barging in and go, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm not here to interrogate the customer. I'm here to have a conversation with the customer. So if I keep my questions open, if I don't ask about problems walking in, back to your marketing area, look, I'm a marketing guy. I'd love for you to use our marketing services. The door is open. You say, come on in. Imagine if I said, nice to meet you. Do you have problems with the way you market? People are going to push back. Even if they did, they're going to think, if I answer that, I'll never get this guy out of here. So no, I'm fine. I just wanted to look at your shirt. Of course I have issues. Why don't we ask them, just tell me about the business a little bit. Tell me about the way you get information out to your customers and how you build your pipeline. To me, those are easy. And each one is like a stepping stone to trust. So we're open. We're not on any problems. We actively listen. Don't interrupt the customer, right? And aim your probes, which means we used a marketing example. If I were selling, I used to sell for Xerox. I'd want to know what's getting printed around here. But if it's marketing, just find out how they're doing it and the way they're doing it. Don't correct them, right? If we do those things, now we're creating some trust. Now we earn the right to get not only at the issue, but deeper at the issue. But it's the first third of the conversation is just loaded with questions. And then, if I may, we get one last trial closeout. It's the greatest trial close that no one uses. See, we've all heard, if I were able to show you an idea that was all this, would you commit to doing that? Okay, that's called a pre-commit. We've all heard that one. But how about this one? Drive to this one question. All those questions about how much, how long, what effect. This question. Do you want to fix it? Now, let me ask it a different way. Is now a good time to look at some alternatives? I'll ask it another way. Are you committed to making a change? All closed probes, you notice. But you see, that's your measuring point. So if we create trust and we create urgency, you want to figure out how well we did? Ask somebody if they think it's worthwhile looking at other ideas. If they tell you no, why would you want to show them other ideas? And if they tell you yes, why would you want to keep pounding away at the problem they just told you they want to fix? If we follow that sequence, we're good to go. And then you're back on home territory. If once somebody says, yes, I'd love to hear what you have, and I really need it, I think everyone knows what to do with that one.
Outstanding, outstanding. And I think when you do that, I was just feeling it as if I was his prospect. If you do that, those budget issues that we get, they go away a little distance away because they've answered your question. So they trust you. They know what the problem is because they're repeating the problem in their head. And then when you get asked, would you like to look at certain alternatives? Suddenly you're thinking, yeah, and you're not thinking about the budget. And you can only feel that emotion if you are a prospect. So why don't you try this with your team or your friend or your budding entrepreneur and be the prospect. So when you go out there to do this process, you'll have so much confidence. And Robert, that's amazing. All right. So I've got one more question and then you can tell us where can people find you. Though we'll be marketing that bit as well. Let me give you this scenario. Okay. There's a 13-year-old right now who's not really started to work, is not an entrepreneur maybe yet. Some of them are. But how would you define customer-centric selling for the next set of millionaires who would be millionaires in the next 10 to 20 years, who've grown up with phones, who've grown up with technology, who've not grown up just with, a phone to call, but to message, to email, to WhatsApp, and all these other things? Does communication and how do you reach out to these people change? And how would customer-centric selling look for the next set of millionaires?
Well, there. Let me answer that this way. When I first started working on this book, I actually looked and found a book it was an insurance company called Northwest Life from 1913. And on the first page, when I opened it up, this guy gave it to me. The first thing it said was, you need to ask questions and listen. And there I am in 1980s going, I'm going to figure all this out. Folks, there's a lot of technology changes, and I get it. And even virtual communication, I have to shorten my stories. Frequently, I have to end my stories with, I tell you this because I don't know where you've been during this story. But technology is changing certain things. But ask yourself, in terms of how we actually communicate right now, what exactly has been the big change over the last 100 years? Has very little to do with technology. So I still believe that the more the other person talks, the more they like you. I still believe that I'm not going to interrogate my client. I'm going to let them feel like they're getting a good conversation with me. Because boy, if they like me, a lot of other things really fall into place. So my point to you is this. Technology is changing. It's going to change. Blink, it's going to change before we get the next week. Okay. But the heart of a conversation, and one last thing, that part about customer-centered selling, the reason it's called customer-centered, okay, is not because I fell in love with the title or I believe in centered things. It's because I'm actually studying every move that the customer makes to choose the tactics that I want to make. Meaning everybody here has probably read a book or listened to a tape or of how to sell. But have you ever studied how people buy? That's what I study. I study the six stages they go through, 3 critical decision points. I'm always mapping out where my client is so I can simply join them where they are and not fall into some sort of robotic, scripted pattern, but react and move where my client is. Now, tell me how technology has changed that. It hasn't. I love technology. We're working with technology right now, but never forget that when we look somebody in the eye or on that screen, it's you and them. It's a conversation. It's communication. It hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Wow, what an answer. Amazing. Wow, man, that's just amazing. Okay, where do people find you? And please find him, all right? You've seen this, and he's got one of the best knowledge and energy out there. Robert, where do we find you?
And I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Yeah,
You can find me at JOLLES.com. And from there, I say that's the easiest one. You'll see that I write something called a blarticle. I actually trademarked that. 12 years ago, I was told to write a blog, and I went, I don't know, this whole blog thing, it seems too trivial. Remember, I'm always trying to figure out what's in it for the customer. So I thought, I want it to be a blog, but more like an article. So I trademarked the word blarticle. And I've written 331 of them over 12 years. And so there's a nice little chest of information there, and you can get on the mailing list. And I also started something on my own podcast called Pocket Size Pep Talks. I'm coming up on my first year, and you're much better at it than I am. But watch out, because I told you, I keep getting better. I'll catch you, but I'm not there yet.
Hey, I would love to listen to it, man. That's just amazing. You've got positive energy, and I think either side of the coin you're at is just a good conversation. That's the feeling I genuinely have. It's flown by. I really appreciate the time that you've given us. And if you have a friend, guys, if you're watching this, and girls, send this across to them. Maybe you needed some info and maybe they needed some. You might have a friend who needs that one tip that is out there in what Robert said. And sometimes it's just energy. You've got it all figured out, but you don't have energy. And you can get that and everything starts flowing for you again together. So thanks a lot, Robert. I really appreciate this. I'm sure we will have more conversations on your podcast, on our podcast, or other places that you and I will meet. And I look forward to all those interactions. So thanks a lot.
It's been a terrific conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, right, it's perfect. Then you have a great session. All the best. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Sleep well. Bye-bye.